When you see a Rolex on someone's wrist, what do you think? Power? Luxury? Status? Now imagine the man behind all of this. He was just an orphan with a dream, rejected by almost everyone. He did not inherit wealth. He had no privileges. But he defied everyone and everything to build the most coveted watch in history. Behind the sparkle of the diamonds and the Swiss precision, there is a story that Rolex itself rarely mentions, an origin marked by loss, genius, war, betrayal, and unwavering ambition. Today, you will meet the hidden side of the most desired brand on the planet. And when you finish this video, you'll never look at a Rolex the same way again. Subscribe to the channel now because you are about to discover how an orphan wrote his name in eternity, using time as his greatest weapon. Hans Wilsdorf was born in 1881 in the small town of Kulmbach, Bavaria, Germany. His life, which would later be associated with luxury, precision, and exclusivity, began tragically. At the age of 12, Hans lost both his parents and became an orphan. His childhood was abruptly interrupted, and he was sent to live with distant relatives. It was the beginning of a journey marked by absence, loss, and a silent determination that would only grow stronger with time. Unlike many stories of the founders of great empires, Hans had neither financial support nor significant social influence. He was raised under strict discipline in boarding schools, far from family affection. Even as a teenager, he demonstrated talent for languages and mathematics, skills that would later be fundamental to his success. But at that moment, all he had was solitude, forced discipline, and the feeling that nobody believed him. At 19, Wilsdorf decided to leave Germany. He went to work in La Chaux-de-Fonds, Switzerland, one of the world's watchmaking capitals. There, he started as an apprentice at a watch export company. It was a technical, meticulous, and unglamorous job. But unlike most young people who pass through there without ambition, Hans saw something beyond the hands and gears, saw potential in what others treated as a simple time-measuring instrument. It was there that he began to imagine something that did not yet exist, a precise, reliable, and stylish wristwatch. At that time, wristwatches were seen as feminine accessories, fragile, inaccurate, and not at all functional for men. Gentlemen wore pocket watches. But Hans questioned this tradition. He believed that the future lay on wrists, and that a watch could be, at the same time, a work of art, a demonstration of engineering, and a status symbol. In silence, he studied everything: gauges, materials, suppliers, trends. Without knowing it, he was already planning what would become one of the most iconic brands in the history of mankind. But at that moment, Hans was still just an unknown orphan in a foreign land, earning minimum wage and with an idea that nobody took seriously. He had no capital. He had no contacts. All I had was time, and the obsession to make every second count. Did you imagine that the creator of Rolex started out like this? Comment below if you already knew this side of the story. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because in the next topic we'll show how Hans made his first unlikely turn and found purpose in the hands of time. In his early 20s, Hans Wilsdorf was no longer the lost young man who arrived in Switzerland with nothing but discipline and a restless gaze. In a short time, he proved to be much more than a simple employee. His attention to detail, his fluency in several languages, and above all, his ability to see value where no one else saw it, they caught the attention of more experienced businesspeople. It was then, in 1905, at the age of 24, that Hans decided to take a bold step. He founded his own company in London, alongside his brother-in-law Alfred Davis. The small firm was named Wilsdorf and Davis initially. It operated as a watch distributor. They imported mechanisms from Switzerland and assembled the watches in England, with the aim of selling them to retailers. But Hans had a much bigger plan. While everyone still treated the wristwatch as an unreliable item, reserved for women or casual occasions, Hans believed it could be as accurate as a pocket watch, and much more practical. But there was a serious technical problem. The mechanisms of the time were unreliable, with a constantly moving pulse. Oscillation, humidity, and sweat affected the accuracy of the timekeeping. Hans was not intimidated. He started working with small Swiss manufacturers. Toto developed a new type of mechanism, more compact, robust, and reliable. IT was an obsession that lasted for years. He knew that if he could create a truly accurate wristwatch, he would have it in his hands. A silent revolution. And then, in 1908, Hans made a move that would change everything: registered the trademark Rolex. The name didn't mean anything in particular. He created it himself. Short, easy to pronounce in any language, symmetrical, and elegant. Hans believed the name needed to sound luxurious, even without explanation. He used to say that Rolex reminded him of the smooth sound of a watch being adjusted, like a precise click. With the trademark secured, Wilsdorf began building what would become one of the greatest powers in the world of watchmaking. But he still faced skepticism from the market. Wristwatches were looked down upon by purists. Most people still believed that a real man carried a pocket watch. That's when Hans made a bold decision. He would bet everything on accuracy. He began submitting his watches to timekeeping tests at Swiss and British institutes, something that almost no other brand did for wristwatches. And the result was impressive. In 1910, a Rolex became the first wristwatch in the world to receive a Swiss certificate of chronometric precision. 4 years later, in 1914, a Rolex model received a Class A certificate from the Kew Observatory in England, the same certificate used for ship chronometers. That was the moment when Hans Wilsdorf turned the game around. The discredited Orphan had proven that a wristwatch could be as accurate as any other. And on top of that, much more elegant. He was no longer competing with other brands. He was redefining what a watch was. Did you know that Rolex was the first brand to achieve this historic recognition? Comment below what surprised you the most, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel. Because in the next topic you'll discover how Hans's audacity gave rise to an empire, even without resources, support, or prestige. The creation of Rolex was not just the birth of a brand. It was the beginning of a movement that would forever transform the global perception of time, luxury, and precision. Hans Wilsdorf didn't just want to sell watches. He wanted to create a symbol. And to do that, he knew he needed to break patterns, challenge market rules, and bet everything on an idea that, at the time, sounded almost absurd: a wristwatch that was more reliable than any pocket watch ever made. After registering the name Rolex in 1908, Wilsdorf began working obsessively towards building a solid, uniform, and unmistakable identity for your creation. Most brands of that era relied on long names, traditional watchmaking families, or brands tied to their city of origin. Hans went against the grain. He created a short, sonorous universal name that meant nothing beyond itself, a word that, over time, would come to mean can. Rolex was born as a quiet promise of excellence, and Hans set about building that reputation piece by piece. He partnered with small Swiss manufacturers specializing in meticulous movements and began distributing the models throughout Europe, focusing on absolute quality. But Hans knew that to truly conquer the world, he needed more than just technical skill. He needed to prove your product's durability under extreme conditions. That's when the idea arose to challenge the limits of watchmaking with public tests and landmark events. One of the most famous examples occurred in 1927, when Mercedes Gleitze swam across the English Channel wearing a Rolex on her wrist. The clock withstood the cold, choppy waters of the canal for more than 10 hours and emerged in perfect working order. This achievement not only proved the water resistance of the Rolex Oyster model, and also served as fuel for a bold advertising campaign. Wilsdorf seized the moment and printed the following phrase in British newspapers: "The clock that survived the crossing of the English Channel." It was the public validation he needed, a landmark advertising campaign that would put Rolex on the world map. Another key point in creating the Rolex identity was the choice of position your products not as time-bound instruments, but as milestones of achievement. Hans associated his watches with great human achievements: crossing oceans, the ascent of Everest, the land speed record, the aerial crossing of the poles. For each deed, a Rolex on the wrist. This concept, "we didn't buy a Rolex, we earned one," it was planted there from the very beginning. And if today the brand name is associated with status and success, it's because Hans built that image with every choice, every campaign, and every strategic decision. Over the years, Rolex has established itself as an organism of its own, with a controlled production chain, internal technological innovations, and quiet yet impactful marketing. Hans didn't just sell watches, he sold history, tradition, excellence, and legacy. Did you know that Rolex was one of the first brands to use real-life watches as marketing material? Comment below what impressed you most about this bold design. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, because in the next section, we'll reveal how Hans' obsession with perfection led to clashes with the Swiss watchmaking elite and redefined what a real watch is. While most Swiss watchmakers of the time were content to repeat formulas that worked, producing handcrafted, often decorative watches aimed at a traditional elite, Hans Wilsdorf decided to follow a solitary, risky, and, for many, insane path: to make the most reliable, durable, and accurate wristwatch in the world. It was a bold promise. But he wasn't interested in pleasing watchmaking purists. He wanted to overcome them all. At the beginning of the 20th century, wristwatches still faced prejudice among men. They were considered fragile, unsuitable for everyday use and, above all, less reliable than traditional pocket watches. Hans saw this ace-perfect opportunity to prove that the wrist was the new symbol of modernity, and that Rolex would be the brand to lead this transformation. For that, he needed more than just ideas. He needed cutting-edge engineering, continuous innovation, and absolute control over production. Unlike many brands that outsource processes, Wilsdorf did the opposite, invested in vertical integration. Rolex began manufacturing its key pieces in-house, developing its own technologies and maintaining rigorously protected industrial secrets. He demanded the impossible from his engineers: lighter gears, longer-lasting lubrication, better sealed housings, more resistant glass, unalterable precision. And this obsession began to bear fruit. In the 1930s, Rolex established itself as the brand with the most accurate wristwatches in the world. Several of their models received chronometer certifications, something previously exclusive to large stationary or nautical clocks. But Hans wanted more. In 1931, he presented the world with yet another revolution: the first automatic mechanism with a perpetual rotor. This allowed the watch to charge its own energy through wrist movement, eliminating the need for manual winding and elevating the concept of practicality and sophistication. Meanwhile, the world was experiencing wars, economic crises, and profound social transformations. But Rolex continued to grow, because he wasn't just selling time, he was selling trust. You could lose your house, your fortune, or even the country where you were born. But a Rolex on your wrist would continue to function, marking time with precision, as if nothing had changed. This level of reliability was uncommon. It was the result of a man obsessed with every detail, from the pressure the button should withstand to the exact sound the crown should make when turned. Hans Wilsdorf did not tolerate mistakes. Each clock was, for him, a precision instrument and a reflection of what he himself wanted to be: impeccable, respected, eternal. This obsession wasn't just technical. It was philosophical. For Hans, perfection was a way to conquer fate. He had lost his parents. He had started out on his own. But by creating a machine that never failed, he rose again and became immortal. Did you already know about Hans Wilsdorf's obsession with the smallest details? Comment below what impressed you the most. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because in the next topic, we'll show how Rolex survived the world wars and, even in the chaos, emerged even stronger and more desirable. The history of Rolex is not built solely on gears and precious metals, but also on resilience in the face of absolute chaos. When World War II broke out in 1939, Europe was plunged into darkness, destruction, and uncertainty. Businesses collapsed, banks failed, entire cities were razed. But amidst this scenario, Hans Wilsdorf kept Rolex standing, and more than that, he turned the brand into a silent symbol of resistance and honor. Based in Geneva, Rolex was located in neutral territory, Switzerland. This gave the company a certain degree of geographical protection, but it didn't exempt it from difficulties. International shipping was disrupted, raw materials became scarce, and the global economy collapsed. Even so, Wilsdorf retained his team, continued developing new models, and above all, he made decisions that transformed the image of Rolex forever. During the war, thousands of British soldiers were captured by the Nazis and sent to prisoner of war camps. Many of them were officers who, before the conflict, they used Rolex watches as a symbol of status and confidence. When they were arrested, their belongings were confiscated, including their watches. Upon learning this, Hans Wilsdorf took an action that shocked the watchmaking world. He personally offered a brand new Rolex watch free of charge to any prisoner of war who requested it by letter. Yes, you read that right. Allied prisoners, upon sending a letter to Rolex headquarters in Switzerland, received a new watch, without having to pay, with a promise that they would settle the amount when the war ended. It was an unprecedented gesture. In the midst of a global crisis, when profit was everyone's priority, Hans placed his bet on mutual trust with strangers in captivity. The result was immeasurable. Thousands of soldiers began carrying Rolex watches as a symbol of dignity, honor, and hope. One of the most striking examples was that of the fighter pilot, Charles Wiley, a prisoner at Stalag Luft III camp, the same one from the famous Great Escape episode, received his Rolex and wore it daily, even amidst suffering. After the war, Wiley repaid his debt and declared that the watch was his property. The silent reminder that the world outside still existed. This episode elevated Rolex to another level. It was no longer just a brand for the rich. It was the mark of the righteous, of the loyal, of those who believe in their word. Hans Wilsdorf, who had already lost everything in childhood, now saw the world losing as well. But he chose to resist. More than resisting, he chose to honor your values even in the hell of war. And so, in the post-war period, when the soldiers returned and the reconstruction of Europe began, Rolex became more than just a product. Era an invisible medal. A reminder of overcoming adversity. A legacy. Did you already know about this historic action by Rolex during the war? Comment below what touched you most about this part of the story. Like this video, share it with those who value principles, and subscribe to the channel. Because in the next topic we'll explore the brand's dark side. Controversial decisions, aggressive marketing, and the secrets Rolex prefers not to reveal. Behind the golden glint, the impeccable elegance and the Swiss precision of Rolex, there is a less romantic, less recounted, and much more strategic side. Hans Wilsdorf built a brand that would stand the test of time, but he did so with decisions that many would classify as harsh, ruthless, and even dark. Rolex didn't become the ultimate status symbol by chance. It was meticulously designed to be untouchable, unreachable, and almost mythological. And this mythology demanded sacrifices. After the war, Hans had already consolidated Rolex's image as a reliable, elite watch with a moral heritage. But that wasn't enough. He wanted something bigger, a symbol that transcended mere utility. He wanted Rolex to be the most coveted object of desire on the planet. To that end, the company began investing heavily in a completely selective and calculated marketing strategy. Rolex did not advertise discounts. I didn't run any promotions. T didn't compete on price. She positioned herself above the competition, not as an option, but as an ideal. One of the brand's most criticized strategies was strict control over distribution. Rolex carefully selected who could sell its products. Stores that did not adhere to the brand's aesthetic standards were eliminated. Distributors who tried to negotiate prices, likewise. The brand also refused to participate in trade shows open to the public for decades, even though it was the most prestigious in the industry. That's because Wilsdorf knew that mystery was a powerful tool. He understood that what is rare becomes valuable. And what is inaccessible, it attracts even more. Over time, Rolex adopted extremely controlled scarcity practices. Popular models were distributed in limited quantities, even with high demand. This created waiting lists that lasted for months, or even years. And guess what that caused? An even greater desire. But perhaps the most controversial aspect of Rolex's history is the secret surrounding the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. Before he died in 1960, Hans transferred 100% of Rolex's shares donated to a private non-profit foundation. According to him, the goal was to ensure that the company would never be sold, that it would remain independent, and that a portion of the profits would be allocated to philanthropy. It turns out that no one outside the foundation knows for sure how this money is managed. The financial statements are not public. The donations are not listed in detail. The internal structure is shrouded in secrecy. This opacity generates criticism. In the end, a company that makes billions every year and supposedly has no owners. Should it be more transparent? Furthermore, the brand spent decades refusing to disclose its production processes, its suppliers, and even its production figures. Everything is secret. Everything is protected. This constant mystery fuels the aura of Rolex. But it also raises questions about what really happens behind the scenes. Were these the decisions necessary to build such a powerful brand? Or has Rolex become a prisoner of the very perfection it sells? What do you think of this darker side of Rolex? Do you believe secrecy is part of its success? Or is it hiding something they don't want the world to see? Comment below, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel. Because in the next topic we'll conclude this journey by revealing how Hans Wilsdorf's legacy shaped the global obsession with status, time, and eternity. Rolex is not just a watch brand. It is a cultural phenomenon, a symbol that transcends generations, countries, and social classes with an almost mythical power. Wearing a Rolex doesn't just say you have money. It says he got there. But how did a German orphan manage to transform a functional object into an absolute status icon? And what was left behind along the way? The answer lies in the meticulously constructed legacy of Hans Wilsdorf. A legacy that combined technical precision, psychological marketing, absolute control, and above all, the manipulation of perceived value. From the early Oyster models, through the Submariner, Datejust, and Daytona, Rolex has created not just watches, but narratives. Each model was connected to an aspirational symbol. Submariner, a journey into the world of adventure and professional diving. Daytona, speed, motorsports, and adrenaline. Datejust, for the timeless elegance of leaders and executives. These watches have been worn by names like James Bond, Steve McQueen, Paul Newman, Roger Federer, and even presidents and spies. Not by chance. It was all part of the plan. Rolex has never been fast. She always was precise, strategic, patient. Did you know that, to become synonymous with luxury, you needed to offer more than just quality? You needed to offer meaning. And this meaning has been reinforced over the years through controlled scarcity, waiting lists, discreet marketing, and surgical partnerships with sporting events, scientific institutions, and high-prestige missions. What few people know is that Rolex never sought to be the most technologically innovative. There are brands that are more complex, more handcrafted, and more sophisticated in engineering. But none can achieve what Rolex does, to dominate the collective imagination. She became a silent language of power. You don't need to explain anything. The Rolex on your wrist speaks for itself.
But this came at a cost. The brand became the target of mass counterfeiting, criticism for its lack of transparency, and, above all, an exaggerated focus on appearance. The obsession with owning a Rolex has become, for many, a race for social validation.
And perhaps that is the deepest irony of Wilsdorf's legacy. An orphan, who started from nothing, created a symbol that is now used by people who want to prove they have everything. Nevertheless, Hans' impact is undeniable. His vision regarding time, precision, image, and trust shaped not only the watchmaking industry, but the way the modern world understands success. Today, more than 60 years after his death, Rolex remains intact, unassailable, and admired.
And even without ever having given an interview, nor signed an autobiography, Hans Wilsdorf built his ultimate monument, one that needs no words, only an eternal ticking of the right wrist.
What impressed you most about this legacy? The genius? The marketing? The philosophy behind the time? Comment below, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel, because we still have many stories of legends who changed the world with simple ideas but boundless ambitions.